Welcome to Democratic Television, a program of the Santa Clara County Democratic Party that brings insights, perspectives, and attitudes of our always thoughtful guests. Our focus today is on open space and the environment, and our guest is Alice Kaufman, the Legislative Advocacy Director for the Committee on Green Foothills. Welcome, Alice. It's great to have you on our show.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
So one of the things that I'd like to start with in discussing with you about the committee is its history, because I find its origin story to be interesting. I think it will be interesting to our guests. Yeah. How did the committee get started?
Well, the Committee for Green Foothills is over 50 years old, and we got our start back in 1962. It was just a group of local residents who were very worried about the plans that Stanford University had to put industrial development in the foothills above the campus. That's why we're the Committee for Green Foothills, so it's to keep the foothills green. So Wallace Stegner was one of the founding members. He was the first president, and of course he was with Stanford at the time, so that was a big statement. And we went on from there and expanded, and we now are working to protect open space and natural resources in both San Mateo and Santa Clara counties. And we don't work just on the foothills. We cover the bay, the coast side, farmland, streams and rivers, forests, and so on, and urban parks.
Very interesting. The foothills that Wallace Stegner and his colleagues would have been concerned about, would they be like the Dish where people walk now, or even further beyond? Was it beyond that
I think it would have been even further beyond. I mean, there were originally plans back in the 60s and 70s, really there were plans to have freeways going all along the coast. There was going to be an additional freeway parallel to 101, but out in the bay, actually. And they were going to cut off the top of San Bruno Mountain and use it to fill in the bay in order to make that happen. The bay itself in the South Bay was going to be reduced to really just a river going out to...
do you know the forces that were at work? Was it population growth or industry coming in?
Yeah, and post-World War II, there was a lot of population growth in the Bay Area, and there were big plans. It was a very car-centered society, and so there were just plans, really what we call sprawl nowadays, just to sprawl all throughout any area that was possibly buildable, use up all the land, and never worry about the natural resources that were being destroyed in the process. But there were some local residents who objected to that and who fought back in a lot of ways. There was a lot of people know about the story of how Save the Bay was founded and the women who got together to make that happen, and the same story is true for Committee for Green Foothills and for other areas.
Was the timing of Save the Bay about the same?
It was all at about the same time. In the early 60s was when all of these movements got started, and that's basically why the Bay Area has so much open space still protected today. You know, we don't look like other areas of the country. We have beautiful open space resources, and that's why.
So, Wallace Stegner and his colleagues got the committee going, and were they sort of a mom and pop organization working out of a garage kind of thing?
Yeah, well, not a garage, but you know, it was working out of people's living rooms. You know, it was ordinary citizens speaking up and going to their city council meetings and communicating to their friends and neighbors and getting them to sign petitions and write letters and let their voices be heard. And that's the power of local citizenry when you have local government. And land use is a local issue. A lot of people don't realize that. They can get very focused on national issues and on what the EPA is doing and so on. But if you're concerned just about land use, if you're concerned about open space, housing, traffic, all of these issues, those are all local issues. And so people really need to start paying attention to what their local governments are doing, because that's where the action is.
So Wallace Stegner and the group that started, were they fighting against Stanford or against county decision makers or against Palo Alto? What was the, it sounds like it was Stanford's plans to develop this land.
They were, it was started with the Stanford plans, but they also were advocating in front of the Palo Alto City Council and the Board of Supervisors. I mean, like I said, there was a mindset at the time of growth, of continual expansion and growth, of opening up new areas by running roads over the Santa Cruz Mountains over to the coast so that we could develop the coast. It was a real mindset of saying that we really need to grow, grow, grow. And so, you know, they were fighting not even against this or that particular entity, but against that mindset and trying to say we need to preserve the trees and the grassland and the wildlife and the streams and rivers.
I wonder what intellectual tradition they drew on, because the kind of the radicalism and the hippies and everything, the get back to the garden stuff of the 60s and 70s would have just been getting going. Was it really more about the Western traditions of open space and preservation of big spaces?
I mean, I think that it sort of owed a lot to that whole mindset. John Muir was,
Right.
very inspirational to a lot of people, and just the attitude that being able to get out into nature is really important for the spirit, and that's something that Community for Green Foothills still believes today.
At some point, I know that at some point some of the protection of open space on the peninsula became more formalized. Did the committee play a role in any of that work?
Yeah, in the 70s, the Mid-Peninsula Regional Open District was created, and Community for Green Foothills was very involved in making that happen, and in the early years of MROSD. And later on, the Santa Clara Valley Open Space Authority was created. So the Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space District has jurisdiction over most of San Mateo County and part of Santa Clara County, and then the Santa Clara Valley Open Space Authority has jurisdiction over sort of the southern part of Santa Clara County. So those are agencies that are there to purchase and preserve land, to manage it, to make it available to the public, create hiking trails and parks for people to enjoy.
So those, let's take the Mid-Peninsula Open Space District. Is that a model of, it sounds like I know that they have significant land ownership, but do they also have regulatory authority over adjacent properties, or is it really just a matter of trying to accumulate and hold meaningful, adjacent parcels?
Yeah, right. No, they're not regulatory agencies. They are land management agencies. So they're, so they're there to preserve the open space and make it available for public access.
I see. Oh, good. So fast forward a bit to kind of modern times, and the timeline in between. Are there milestones that the committee has gone through? Because the committee now, I think, is recognized as a significant and kind of more professionalized advocacy group. And is that just something that happened over time, as the committee continued to work on these issues?
Yeah, it is something that happened. I mean, this is the course that a lot of small nonprofit organizations take. You start out with just a bunch of people getting together to work on something, and you grow, and the longer that you last and the more victories that you have, the more clout that you have.
Right.
And so we now have hundreds of households supporting us throughout both counties. We work with the county supervisors and the agencies and many cities throughout both counties. And, like I said, our reach has really expanded, and the work that we do touches all sorts of areas in the Bay Area.
Do you find in your work that that the committee has good partners in local government? Is it more kind of educating and calling on them to make good decisions, or is it sometimes more confrontational? What's your experience been?
Yeah, there's a wide range of different experiences. Every city council is going to be different. And it also has to do with the fact that some cities just have a lot more open space issues going on than other cities do. But in general, we have found that elected officials really do care about open space for the most part. They're, both because they understand that their constituents care about it, and also because they care about it themselves. I mean, these are people for the most part who've grown up here and who love the quality of life that the Bay Area has, and they understand that having so much open space around is part of that.
Right. And when one almost from any location in the peninsula and San Jose and Santa Clara County, it's possible to look up and see these beautiful open foothills. And so it's interesting to reflect on the fact that the work of the committee and the community of environmentalists is really protecting that and making that resource available to all of us.
It's something that a lot of people don't realize. How much the people who fought in decades past, the victories that they've had, you can see them when you look. And maybe it'd be more accurate to say it's what you don't see. It's that you don't see the hills above Palo Alto covered with houses or factories or other buildings.
Right.
It's that you don't see the bay being filled in, and things are. There obviously have been a lot of changes over the past few hundred years, but the fact that we've managed to make it so that, for the most part, people still can access open space. We're not entirely there yet. One of the missions that we have is for urban open space, to try to make it so that people can get out into nature, even if they can't drive for half an hour to get to one of the preserves up in the hills and go hiking. You should be able to access nature within 10 minutes from your home.
I see. That's interesting. Do you think that would require transforming any areas, or really more kind of just preserving and making them more accessible, spaces that already exist in these areas?
I think both. I think that we're seeing a lot of push for development and growth right now. We have the housing crisis, for example, and this is something that a lot of people are really concerned about. All of us at Committee for Green Foothills are, definitely agree that we need to have more housing. But how we get that housing is really important. That it's not a good idea to just say, anywhere where we have open space, we should put housing there because we need it so badly. Because then what you end up happening is you have enough housing for everyone, but then their quality of life is not what it should be because they don't have, the access to open space that they ought to be able to have. So being very thoughtful and deliberate about how we plan for the growth that we have, and making sure that as we make those plans, we're making sure that we're also including room for green space.
So does the committee get involved in housing issues per se, or really do you try to be a voice for having access to open space and preserving those spaces and let others be more the experts about housing? Yeah,
I would say the latter. I mean, we're the group that is most focused on open space in this area. There are other groups that work on housing, and we do partner with them at times. And, I mean, as I said, that's, we're always very aware of these issues and, and other issues as well concerning social equity and issues of that sort. But every organization needs to have a focus and needs to know what their goals are. And so our goal is preservation of open space.
So you mentioned earlier, I think this may be a partial answer, that land use issues are very local, but sometimes a group like the committee would be gobbled up by the Sierra Club or some national organization and would just become sort of a chapter. What would you attribute the continued independence and the fact that that the committee is thriving as a local agency?
Yeah. Well, honestly, there's a lot of work to do. I mean, we do partner with the Sierra Club and Audubon Society and various other groups, Greenbelt Alliance, and there's really never any, concern about, there not being enough fights
Local
for everybody
fights
to fight. Yeah, there's just an embarrassment of riches in terms of the amount of work that we all have to do. So we all partner together, and it works out really well.
Yes, and I suppose locally we are victims of our success in so many ways, and one of them is that there's this growth in population that is naturally in tension with the committee's interest in protecting the foothills and open spaces. So.
Yeah, there is a tension there, but it's certainly not unsolvable. There's obviously we need to increase the density in our urban areas and have transit-oriented development, and make sure that people are living near to where they can access their work and schools and the shopping that they need to do and so on. It really doesn't make sense. I mean, this is the whole point of sprawl, of why sprawl is a bad thing. It's not just in order to preserve open space, and planners will all agree that sprawl is simply very expensive for cities. It's expensive to provide services like police and fire to developments that are just cover a lot of square miles.
Well, we'll have a chance to speak about those specific issues in some specific context of specific questions in the second segment of our show. So thank you very much for sharing what you've shared.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, my name is Steve Preminger. I'm a longtime Democratic Party and community activist. Donald Trump is our president. I know that doesn't sound good, but it's true. This is the time for all Democrats and other people in our community to come together to form an alliance like we haven't seen here in Santa Clara County. We don't know what's going to come down from the Trump administration. Based on his campaigns, it can't be good. The local Democratic Party is the antidote. They're developing an alliance of community and other activists, and they need you to join. Give them a call at 408-445-9500.
We're back for the second segment of our show with Alice Kaufman from the Committee for Green Foothills. Alice, before the break, we were talking a bit about open space and the history of the committee, and our listeners are often interested to know how our guest became involved in his or her work, and so I'm interested in how did you become the Legislative Advocacy Director at the committee? Were you a longtime environmental activist? How did you come to that? What was your path?
Yeah, well, I was I was an environmental lawyer for a while. I took some time off after my kids were born, and then I live in Redwood City. And a few years ago, there was a proposal for a huge, massive development, really a city of 30,000 people on the Cargill salt ponds in Redwood City. And so I got involved with some other Redwood City residents in fighting that, and Committee for Green Foothills was one of the environmental organizations that was also fighting that. And so that was how I first found out about CGF and got involved.
I see. Yeah. So your kind of personal advocacy in a battle that affected you very individually made you aware of the committee, and then how did you come to decide, well, that's something I would like to continue to do and do in my professional life? Yeah,
I think, it just struck me as being one of the most, one of the best things I could do with my time. I felt like land use and land use decisions were really sort of one of the most important issues that we have, that the environmental movement is facing right now. I had been doing litigation under the Clean Water Act and regarding lead paint exposure and so on, but I really wanted to get involved in something that was going to affect everybody's quality of life on a daily basis, and so that's how I got involved.
Well, good. In your role as Legislative Advocacy Director, what is the nature of the work that you're doing, and how did you come particularly to take on that role at the committee?
Well, advocacy is the main part of what Committee for Green Foothills does. We're our mission statement says that we do advocacy, education, and grassroots action. So we have educational events and so on, but we really revolve around advocacy. So what that involves is, a whole lot of talking with a lot of different people. We meet with community members, with elected officials, with agency staff, with other environmental organizations, and figuring out ways that everybody can work together to preserve open space and natural resources.
I see. In the work that you do, how does the committee decide which issues to really take a more active and leading role in being an advocate?
Yeah, like I was saying before, there's no shortage of issues to concentrate on, and for us, it's often a decision of where we feel like there's a really great threat, and where we feel like there is something that is really important to preserve, where there could be a really huge impact if something was lost. And we're also looking proactively for some of the big issues that are facing the region today, like for example sea level rise. That's something that everyone is aware of and is kind of worried about, but not everybody is really taking action to try to do what they can about sea level rise. So that's something that we're going to be starting to get involved in.
I see. And the work of the committee, you focus not only on sort of, the enjoyment of human life, because we can see the foothills and we can visit them and have contact with nature, but it's also the case that you're concerned with kind of waterways and land pathways for animals. How do you balance those things, or do you find that they generally align very naturally?
Yeah, I think that they do align. I think that most people do want to preserve wildlife and wildlife habitat, and most people do think that it's important to have clean creeks and to have the bay, have clean water and to have clean air and so on. Those things I think all do very much align.
I see. I wanted to be sure that we touch on one campaign and effort that I know that the committee is currently involved in, and that is the protecting the evergreen area from a proposed development. Could you say a little bit about how the committee came to be involved in that matter and what the issues and what's at stake there?
Yeah, well, so the issue that you're talking about is actually something that's coming on the ballot in June for San Jose voters. So there are two measures that people in San Jose are going to have the opportunity to vote on. That's Measure B and Measure C. And Measure B is what some people call the Evergreen Initiative, which is what you just referred to. There's a particular site, 200 acres of open space that's adjacent to the foothills in East San Jose in Evergreen. And what Measure B would do is to create a housing development of 900 homes that would go on that site. And in addition to that, it would also create what's called a senior housing overlay that would apply to all of San Jose. And it's actually the senior housing overlay that most of the environmental groups, such as Committee for Green Foothills, are most worried about, because that potentially could open up a whole lot of areas, including some very valuable open space areas, to development.
So these decisions are normally made by a city council. And why is it that there's something coming before the voters, or why are there two measures coming before the voters in this case?
Yeah, well, the two measures. So the second measure is called Measure C, and that's one that would actually prevent Measure B from being implemented. Measure C applies to lands that are within 1 mile of the urban growth boundary, which of course is the outer edge of the developable land in San Jose. And it puts extra requirements on any residential development that would occur on any lands that are currently employment lands within that area. And it puts requirements such as having 50% of housing units be affordable, requiring that they comply with certain environmental regulations and things of that sort. So those are the two measures, Measure B and Measure C.
So the idea is that the committee's position would be to have development of housing happen within existing boundaries, more likely than beyond and sprawling beyond current existing.
That really does sum up the whole issue. I mean, Measure B, which we oppose, I should make it clear, we're saying vote no on Measure B, and a big reason for that is the sprawl, like you just said. It's the particular parcel that would be approved by Measure B is way out on the outskirts of the city. Putting single-family homes out there is sprawl. That's residential sprawl, and it's not where the city's general plan has indicated that residential growth should happen. The general plan says that housing needs to happen near transit centers in the urban villages and so on. Like I was saying before the break, it's areas where people have access to public transit, where they can get to their jobs, to schools, to shopping, and so on and so forth. And Measure C sort of supports that and says that it says that if you're going to build residential development out there on the edges in the sprawl areas, then it has to fit all of these other guidelines as well in order to make sure that it's something that's going to provide public benefit for the city rather than be a burden.
Right. I think that it's one of the most often observed complaints about, especially developments that one might characterize as sprawl. That there's a lot of cost associated with them, and they're not really that sustainable. They're not really that well supported.
Yeah. And San Jose has had decades of experience with this because I mean, San Jose, as a lot of people can tell just by driving through it, has a whole lot of residential sprawl in it. And what the city has discovered over the years is that it's very expensive to have all that much sprawl. So that's why the whole city council and the mayor is opposed to Measure B, because they don't want to have to deal with all the sprawl.
Yeah. So could you be more specific about the actual land that's most at stake here? In addition to the Evergreen area, there's Coyote Valley, which I know a lot of environmentalists consider to be a sensitive and important place.
Yes, and Coyote Valley is something that Committee for Green Foothills and a lot of other environmental groups have been fighting to protect for a long time. It's really important. When we say open space is important in general, of course, but Coyote Valley in particular is really significant as a wildlife corridor. So if you can picture in your mind the Santa Cruz Mountains, thanks to all the efforts that we were talking about before, are largely open space and have a lot of redwood forests and a lot of other habitat that animals can enjoy, but the square mileage of the Santa Cruz Mountains is not all that great, especially for large animals like mountain lions, and they really need to be able to migrate in and out of that area. And the thing about Coyote Valley is that it is one of the only places where animals can migrate from the Santa Cruz Mountains over to the Diablo Range and beyond, going all the way down to Central and Southern California. So for animals to be able to get in and out of these areas is as important as just having habitat for them where they live.
So it sounds like that a lot of other things like roads or high-speed rail might possibly, if not done correctly, break those pathways as well. Does the committee have a view about what should happen in terms of high-speed rail running through that area? Yeah,
that's a really great question. I mean, as you said, roads as well as high-speed rail. The situation in Coyote Valley right now is although animals are getting across, a lot of times they're getting hit and killed on roads. In addition to Highway 101, there's Monterey Road, Monterey Highway, excuse me, that goes parallel to Highway 101, and that is a place where there's a whole lot of roadkill. There's a whole lot of places where animals get killed, bobcats and coyotes as well as smaller animals. And so the problem with high-speed rail is if they were to do what's called an at-grade alignment rather than an aerial viaduct, then the problem of how animals are going to get across Coyote Valley would be even greater. So we are advocating for the high-speed rail alignment through Coyote Valley to be on an aerial viaduct so the animals can simply go underneath. Alternatively, if high-speed rail were going to be at grade, it would be really important to have some kind of a land bridge over, probably over both the rail line and Monterey Road because they're right next to each other, and for animals to be able to get across there.
Well, we'll join you in continuing to monitor those developments. Before we end, I would want to be sure that our guests would know, our viewers would know how to reach you if they would like to reach you. What would you suggest if they wanted to contact the committee or contact you at the committee?
Yeah, anybody can go to our website, which is www.greenfoothills.org, and contact any of our advocates directly. All of our contact information is on there, and we're always happy to hear from the public.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, thank you for sharing the insights that you've shared with us today. We're really grateful to learn about the Committee for Green Foothills and the work that you're doing. And so thank you for sharing your story and the interesting history of the Committee for Green Foothills. Is there any last item you'd like to mention about the work that you're doing, or have we covered the things that are most currently of interest to you?
Yeah, I guess I would really like to say, there's a lot of important issues that are facing Democrats and everybody, in the region, and I personally am involved in on my personal time and a whole lot of these other issues as well. But I would really hope that everybody would remember how important it is, how important nature is, and not just in terms of the large scale sort of the national issues like our national parks, Yosemite and Yellowstone, but also the nature that's right here in our own backyards. Right. And it's especially important for those of us who don't have backyards, yes. Because we live in apartments or in urban areas where there isn't a lot of private open space. Right. Public open space becomes really important.
Wonderful. Thank you for that final thought, Alice. Thank you for watching DTV. Give us a call at 408-445-9500 or visit our website at www.sccdp.org. Help us to make a difference. We will see you on the campaign trail.